You see, divine favor isn't random or accidental. It's intentional, purposeful, and precisely timed. What we often interpret as God's silence is actually His meticulous preparation, molding your character to handle the abundance that's coming. These seasons of emptiness aren't meant to break you. They're designed to prepare you to recognize God's glory when the blessing finally arrives. The world calls it luck when finances suddenly shift. But those who walk with God understand that favor is a sacred covenant between your faith and His promise. Stay with me until the end of this series, because what you're about to discover about God's financial favor system might completely transform how you view your current circumstances. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, yet your finances remain stuck in an endless drought? Like your prayers for abundance seem to vanish into thin air while others around you prosper? What if I told you that this season of lack isn't a punishment, but a divine preparation for something extraordinary that's about to happen in your life? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. There comes a moment in every believer's journey when what appears to be a financial drought is actually God's strategic positioning for unprecedented blessing. Has this ever happened to you? You look at your bank account with disappointment, wondering when things will change, not realizing that God is orchestrating something magnificent behind the scenes. Think about this. What if every rejection, every closed door, every financial setback wasn't actually a denial, but a divine redirection? What if God allowed you to experience lack so that when He floods your bank with favor, you'll know without a doubt that it was His doing and not your own? God tests your heart through these waiting periods. He's not ignoring your prayers. He's enlarging your capacity to receive. He's purifying your motives and aligning your heart with obedience, because favor flows most powerfully through those who have been tested and proven faithful. What's fascinating about divine preparation is how it often works silently and invisibly. While you see nothing changing on the surface, God is rearranging circumstances, connecting divine opportunities, and establishing foundations for your breakthrough that will soon become visible. What you're experiencing right now, that financial pressure, that waiting period, that season where others seem blessed while you remain in lack, it might actually be the strongest evidence that you're on the verge of a financial flood. What if I told you that there's a hidden truth behind every unanswered prayer for financial breakthrough? What appears to be God's delay is actually His divine design unfolding in your life. This revelation completely transformed my understanding of the waiting seasons. You see, during these periods when heaven seems silent, God isn't ignoring your prayers or putting you on hold. He's actively working on enlarging your capacity to receive what's coming. It's like a farmer preparing the soil before planting precious seeds. The preparation may seem tedious, but it's essential for a bountiful harvest. Every financial delay in your journey serves a specific purpose in God's timeline. Think about it. If you received massive abundance before your character was ready, before your mindset was aligned, would you truly be able to steward it well? This is the profound wisdom behind God's timing that most people miss. There's a spiritual principle at work here that operates behind the scenes of your visible circumstances. Before every flood of blessing, there must first be a flood of faith. The invisible always precedes the visible. Your spirit must expand before your bank account can. This is why God often allows us to walk through valleys before leading us to mountaintops. Hit subscribe now to unlock more powerful revelations about divine favor and financial breakthrough in your life. I've discovered that these seasons of apparent lack aren't random hardships, they're strategic preparations. When you're rejected, overlooked, or facing closed doors, God is actually qualifying you for favor. He's building within you the humility required to handle wealth without being consumed by it. The impact of this understanding is life-changing. When you recognize that God prepares the vessel before pouring in the blessing, your entire perspective shifts. Suddenly, those difficult financial seasons become classrooms rather than punishment. Each disappointment becomes a divine appointment with destiny. Many people crumble under the weight of unexpected wealth because their internal foundation wasn't strong enough to support it. This explains why we so often see lottery winners end up broke or celebrities destroy themselves with excess. Their accounts were filled before their character was formed. God's pattern reveals a profound wisdom. He tests you in the small things before entrusting you with greater abundance. He watches how you handle rejection before granting you acceptance. He observes your faithfulness with little before releasing much. This isn't cruel, it's the most loving thing he could do. The most remarkable transformation occurs not when your circumstances change, but when your mindset shifts to recognize these delays as divine positioning. When you understand that God is enlarging your capacity during the waiting, gratitude replaces frustration and peace overcomes anxiety. Now, I want to go even deeper into the spiritual economy that governs how divine favor flows into your life. There are specific principles that determine whether you become a reservoir or a river of God's blessing. Write in the comments, "My delay is divine design," if you're beginning to see your waiting period in a completely new light. One of the most revolutionary revelations I've discovered on this journey is that divine favor operates on an entirely different system than the world's economy. When God decides to flood your life with blessing, it happens completely independent of economic trends, government policies, or financial markets. This truth liberates you from the anxiety that comes with constantly monitoring worldly systems. Think about it. How many times have you witnessed someone receive an unexpected breakthrough that defied all logic and statistical probability? That's because God's economy isn't bound by human limitations or conventional wisdom. When heaven decides it's your season for abundance, one divine connection can accomplish more than years of networking. One inspired idea can generate more wealth than decades of traditional planning. This supernatural dynamic doesn't require permission from banks, approval from institutions, or validation from experts. God can take one seed and multiply it into a forest of provision. He can transform one opportunity into a generational legacy of wealth. His favor bypasses the normal channels and creates pathways where none existed before. But here's where many believers miss the crucial catalyst that activates this divine system, the generosity test. Behind the scenes, God is constantly watching how you handle resources when they're limited. This test reveals if you're truly ready for the flood that's coming. I've witnessed this pattern repeatedly. Closed hands cannot receive open heavens. God fills what is open and blesses what is released. It's a profound spiritual principle that operates like gravity, consistent and undeniable. When your grip tightens around your resources during seasons of scarcity, you actually block the very channels through which abundance would flow. The mindset transformation required here is radical. Giving, when it doesn't make mathematical sense, positions you for supernatural provision. It's not about irresponsible financial decisions, but about strategic spiritual investments that demonstrate your trust in God's economy rather than man's. This revelation challenges the core of conventional thinking. The world says, accumulate when times are tough, but divine wisdom says, release and receive. Those who give faithfully during their desert season are actually watering the seeds of their coming harvest. They're making declarations with their actions that speak louder than any prayer. I've seen people completely transform their financial trajectory by embracing this countercultural approach. When they chose to be generous despite their own lack, They unknowingly triggered a spiritual mechanism that attracted supernatural favor. Their decisions to release what little they had created vacuums that God rushed to fill with abundance. The hidden truth here is that generosity isn't just about helping others, it's about positioning yourself in the divine economy. It's declaring to the spiritual realm that you're a conduit, not a reservoir. God isn't looking for hoarders to bless. He's searching for distributors who will allow his resources to flow through them. Let's explore how this principle plays out in real-life scenarios and the specific ways divine favor manifests when you align with heaven's economy. Type "open hands, open heavens" in the comments if you're ready to position yourself for supernatural provision through generosity. Let me share something profound that completely shifted my understanding of divine timing. What if I told you that right now, while everything still looks dry in your life, God is already orchestrating your breakthrough beneath the surface? This is the hidden dimension of favor that most people miss, the underground work that precedes visible manifestation. Think about how a seed works. Before you see any sprout breaking through the soil, an entire root system is developing in darkness. This is exactly how God operates in your financial journey. While your bank account may still show the same numbers, behind the scenes, he's establishing foundations, aligning relationships, and positioning resources that will soon become visible. This revelation transformed my perspective during my own season of waiting. I realized that divine silence doesn't equal divine inactivity. The miracle is already in motion, even when we can't perceive it. God is meticulous with his timing. He's preparing not just the blessing, but also preparing others to witness your elevation so that your testimony becomes undeniable. Those who once doubted your faith, who questioned your decisions, who perhaps even mocked your financial drought, they are being positioned to witness God completely rewriting your financial destiny. Their skepticism will make your testimony even more powerful when the flood of favor finally breaks through the surface. But here's where so many believers sabotage their breakthrough. They allow fear to dominate during this critical preparation phase. This brings me to a spiritual principle that governs the flow of divine abundance. Favor flows to the faithful, not the fearful. When you analyze the spiritual mechanics behind this principle, it makes perfect sense. Fear functions like a dam in your spiritual life, blocking the current of abundance that God is trying to release. Every worried thought, every anxiety-filled declaration becomes a brick in that dam. Meanwhile, trust acts as a channel that attracts divine provision. The words you speak during your waiting season aren't just expressions of emotion. They're spiritual currency that either appreciates or depreciates your coming breakthrough. When you declare, "I'll never get out of this financial hole," you're literally programming your spirit to repel blessing. But when you affirm, "God is my source and my supply is on its way," you're creating access points for supernatural provision. This isn't mystical thinking, it's spiritual reality. Your words carry creative power because they reflect what you truly believe. And what you truly believe determines what you're able to receive. In the divine economy, your faith is your credit score. It determines your capacity for supernatural abundance. I've witnessed this firsthand with countless people who shifted their internal dialogue from scarcity to abundance, from panic to peace. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but as they consistently chose words of faith over fear, their external reality began to align with their internal declarations. The journey toward financial overflow requires this radical mindset revolution, moving from earthly calculations to heavenly expectations. Now let's explore what happens in the atmosphere around you when you make this pivotal shift. Drop faith over fear in comments if you're committed to changing your financial declarations starting today. The atmosphere around you is profoundly affected by the words you release into it. This is why declarations aren't just positive thinking, They're spiritual technology that align your reality with God's intentions. Your words create a frequency that either attracts or repels divine favor. This revelation completely transformed my approach to challenging financial seasons. There's a spiritual principle at work here that few truly understand. God cannot bless what we curse with our own words. Think about that for a moment. When you constantly declare, "I'm broke," "I'll never get ahead," or "I can't afford it," you're literally sealing your drought with your own tongue. These aren't innocent expressions of frustration. They're powerful declarations that program your financial reality. The breakthrough comes when you begin to intentionally shift your language regardless of your current circumstances. When you declare, "God is my source," instead of "I don't have enough," you're creating pathways for provision. When you affirm, "I am blessed and highly favored," despite what your bank account shows, you're establishing a spiritual architecture that can support abundance. I've witnessed remarkable transformations in people who simply changed their vocabulary around money. Their external reality didn't shift overnight, but as they persisted in speaking life instead of lack, unexpected opportunities began appearing. Relationships that carried blessing suddenly formed, and resources arrived from sources they never anticipated. This mindset revolution leads us to a profound understanding about the true nature of wealth. What if money isn't just currency, but actually a manifestation of divine trust? This perspective completely reframes how we view prosperity. When God sees faithful stewardship in small things, He releases greater resources because He knows they'll be managed with wisdom and integrity. The hidden truth here is that God isn't looking for perfect financial skills. He's looking for hearts that view wealth as a sacred responsibility rather than a personal indulgence. He's searching for those who will become channels of His provision rather than reservoirs that hoard out of fear. This is why some believers remain in financial drought despite their prayers and faith. They've demonstrated through their handling of small resources that they would consume rather than contribute, accumulate rather than activate, and hoard rather than help if given abundance. Divine favor follows divine principles. God entrusts more to those who prove trustworthy with less. Don't miss out on life-changing spiritual insights. Subscribe now and join our community of believers expecting supernatural provision. The journey toward financial overflow requires this fundamental shift in how we perceive wealth. When you begin to see money as a tool for kingdom impact rather than personal security, something profound happens in the spiritual atmosphere around you. You become someone heaven can trust with influence and affluence. I've observed this pattern repeatedly. Those who steward small amounts with gratitude and generosity eventually attract greater abundance. Not because God plays favorites, but because they've aligned themselves with the spiritual laws that govern divine provision. Let's explore how this alignment with heaven's economy begins to manifest in unexpected ways through divine connections and supernatural opportunities. Type "steward, not owner" in the comments if you're ready to shift your relationship with wealth and become a trusted channel for God's resources. One of the most fascinating aspects of divine favor is what it does to your visibility in both the natural and spiritual realms. When God begins to flood a life with supernatural blessing, something remarkable happens. People who once overlooked, ignored, or even rejected that person suddenly begin to notice them. This social transformation isn't manipulation or networking strategy. It's the magnetic effect of heaven's endorsement. I've witnessed this phenomenon repeatedly. Someone struggles for years in obscurity, faithful yet forgotten. And then suddenly, as if a divine spotlight switched on, the same people who wouldn't return their calls are reaching out with opportunities. The same businesses that rejected their proposals are asking to partner. The same doors that remained firmly shut begin to swing open without effort. What makes this aspect of favor so powerful is that it cannot be manufactured or replicated through human effort. Those who experience this supernatural recognition often find themselves in rooms they didn't qualify for by conventional standards and receiving opportunities they didn't pursue through traditional channels. This is because favor operates on a different frequency than human systems. When these sudden elevations occur, people will inevitably try to explain the success through logical means, attributing it to timing, market conditions, or even luck. But those with spiritual discernment recognize the fingerprints of divine intervention. There's a quality to God-orchestrated breakthrough that defies natural explanation. It carries a weight of glory that human achievement simply cannot produce. This understanding reveals a profound truth about the journey toward financial overflow. The most powerful movements of God often begin in complete silence. Before rain falls visibly, clouds gather quietly. Before rivers flood their banks, waters rise imperceptibly. The greatest divine interventions start with invisible alignments that human eyes cannot detect. God moves like a master chess player, positioning resources, aligning divine connections, and orchestrating perfect timing long before you see the first evidence of change. While you're wondering if heaven has forgotten your address, God is actually coordinating a complex sequence of events that will culminate in undeniable blessing. This behind-the-scenes work explains why breakthrough often appears suddenly after extended seasons of apparent inactivity. What looks like divine delay is actually divine development, the preparation of both you and your environment for sustainable abundance. God isn't just bringing you blessing, He's creating an ecosystem around you that can support your elevation. The revelation of this invisible preparation completely transforms how we navigate waiting seasons. Instead of focusing on what isn't happening, we can rest in the confidence that movement is occurring beyond our perception. The foundations of favor are being established, the networks of provision are being woven, and the timeline of blessing is being perfectly calibrated. I've counseled many people through these threshold moments, when everything still looks dry, but spiritual discernment indicates that heaven is gathering. The key is developing sensitivity to recognize the subtle signs of approaching favor, increased spiritual hunger, sudden creative ideas, strategic connections forming, and an inexplicable peace despite unchanged circumstances. Those who understand this pattern can cooperate with divine timing instead of fighting against it. They position themselves to receive by preparing their character, organizing their finances, and cultivating gratitude before the first drop of abundance appears. Write, "I see the clouds." A gathering in the comments if you're sensing divine movement in your life, even though circumstances haven't visibly changed yet. One of the most breathtaking spiritual phenomena I've witnessed is what I call divine reversal. That miraculous moment when God completely flips a person's circumstances. This powerful transformation follows a consistent pattern. Faithfulness in small things eventually triggers a supernatural reversal in the visible realm. This isn't random blessing, it's the divine recognition of stewardship and character developed in secret. What makes this reversal so powerful is its completeness. The same hands that once reached out for financial help become the hands extended to help others. The voice that once whispered desperate prayers for provision becomes the voice testifying of God's abundant faithfulness. This journey from need to provision for others creates an undeniable testimony that glorifies God rather than human effort. I've counseled numerous individuals through this transformative process, watching in awe as their financial identity completely shifted. People who once couldn't imagine paying their bills suddenly found themselves funding ministries, supporting missions, and investing in kingdom initiatives. This metamorphosis isn't just about improved circumstances, it's about rewritten identity and expanded purpose. When God says it's time for you to prosper, absolutely nothing can prevent that elevation. No economic downturn, no human opposition, no past failure can block what heaven has decreed. Divine timing operates with a precision and power that simply overwhelms earthly limitations. This revelation liberates you from anxiety about external factors that seem threatening. But here's where many believers fundamentally misunderstand prosperity. God's favor isn't primarily about accumulation, it's about assignment. This perspective shift is revolutionary. The divine purpose behind financial blessing isn't so you can build bigger barns to store more goods. It's so you can become a more effective distribution center for heaven's resources. The distinction between a trophy and a testimony reveals the heart behind prosperity. When wealth becomes your trophy, something you display, protect, and use primarily for personal advancement, the flow of divine favor often slows. But when prosperity becomes your testimony, evidence of God's faithfulness that you freely share to inspire others, heaven continues, pouring without limitation. I've observed this spiritual principle consistently. Those who view abundance as a sacred assignment rather than a personal achievement find that their resources multiply beyond explanation. Their generosity doesn't diminish their wealth, it mysteriously increases it. Their impact expands exponentially because they've aligned with the true purpose of prosperity. This mindset revolution requires courage, the courage to hold blessings with open hands rather than clenched fists. It demands a fundamental reorientation from self-preservation to kingdom advancement. The profound paradox is that by releasing control, you actually position yourself for greater increase. By focusing less on accumulation, you attract more abundance. This journey toward financial overflow involves a complete identity transformation. You begin to see yourself not as an owner, but as a steward, not as a consumer, but as a conduit. Your relationship with money shifts from anxiety to authority, from scarcity thinking to supernatural expectation. You become comfortable with increase because you understand its purpose. The powerful revelation here is that prosperity with purpose never runs dry. When your wealth becomes a witness, when your abundance advances God's agenda, you tap into an unlimited supply. Let's explore how this divine partnership begins to manifest through strategic connections and supernatural opportunities. Drop purpose, not possession, in the comments if you're ready to shift from seeing prosperity as something you own to something you're entrusted with for divine assignment. When we examine the architecture of divine favor more closely, a fascinating pattern emerges, one that completely transformed my understanding of how heaven's economy operates. There are actually three distinct dimensions of favor that, when aligned, create an unstoppable flow of abundance in your life. The first dimension is divine favor, that sacred seal of heaven's approval over your life, decisions, and pursuits. This is the foundation of all prosperity, the invisible endorsement that precedes visible blessing. When God's hand of approval rests on you, obstacles that block others somehow become bridges for your advancement. The second dimension is relational favor, that mysterious magnetic quality that attracts the exact people who carry answers to your prayers. Haven't you noticed how divinely orchestrated connections seem to appear just when you need them? Someone with precisely the expertise, resources, or opportunity you require suddenly crosses your path. This isn't coincidence, it's the relational dimension of favor activating on your behalf. The third dimension is material favor, the tangible manifestation of provision in your physical reality. This includes financial increase, debt cancellation, unexpected resources, and supernatural multiplication of what you already possess. It's when heaven's economy becomes visible in your earthly experience. The revelation that completely revolutionized my journey is this: when all three dimensions align, wealth flows effortlessly. The struggle ends. The striving ceases. The anxious pursuit of provision is replaced by the peaceful expectation of abundance. This alignment doesn't happen randomly. It happens strategically when you position yourself correctly. This brings me to a profound principle that many believers miss. Preparation signals faith. When you prepare for abundance before there's any visible evidence of its arrival, you're making one of the most powerful faith declarations possible. Think about Noah building an ark when there wasn't a cloud in the sky. His preparation became a physical demonstration of his spiritual conviction. What would it look like for you to build your financial ark while the skies are still clear? It might mean organizing your finances, creating budgets for blessing you haven't received yet, opening accounts for overflow that hasn't arrived, or clearing space in your environment for increase. These tangible acts of preparation send a clear message to both the spiritual and natural realms. You're expecting heaven to move on your behalf. I've witnessed remarkable breakthroughs for people who simply began preparing their lives for the favor they were believing for. They detached from negative influences that drained their faith. They created systems to manage the abundance they didn't yet see. They established structures that could sustain blessing when it arrived. And something supernatural happened. Order began to attract abundance. This is a spiritual principle that operates with consistent precision. Structure sustains blessing. God doesn't pour increase into chaos. He doesn't entrust abundance to disorganization. The level of order in your life often determines the level of overflow you can maintain. Type "building my ark" in the comments if you're committed to preparing your life for the favor that's on its way to you. There's a spiritual practice so powerful, yet so overlooked, that it completely transformed my understanding of divine timing. I call it prophetic gratitude, the revolutionary act of thanking God for blessings that haven't yet materialized in your visible reality. This isn't wishful thinking or emotional manipulation. It's one of the most profound faith declarations possible. When you express gratitude for something you haven't yet received, you're essentially telling heaven, "I'm so confident in your faithfulness that I'm celebrating in advance." This posture of thanksgiving speaks louder than any petition or plea. It communicates readiness and expectation in a language heaven instantly recognizes. I've witnessed remarkable acceleration happen when people shifted from constant asking to consistent thanking. Something supernatural occurs when gratitude precedes manifestation. It creates a spiritual atmosphere that attracts favor. It's as if every thank you becomes a seed that multiplies into more blessing. Think about how this transforms your daily practice. Instead of waking up focused on what's missing, you rise with gratitude for what's coming. Rather than praying, "God, when will my finances change?" you declare, "Thank you for the abundance that's already been released in the spiritual realm and is making its way to me." This mindset revolution positions you to receive in a way that desperate prayers often don't. Gratitude isn't just an emotional response to blessing. It's actually a catalyst that draws blessing closer. It demonstrates a level of spiritual maturity and faith that heaven responds to with acceleration. Those who master prophetic gratitude often experience breakthrough at a pace that defies natural timing. Now here's a counterintuitive revelation that completely changed my perspective during difficult seasons. Unusual attacks often signal the proximity of unusual blessing. When you suddenly face intensified spiritual warfare, increased opposition, or unexpected obstacles, it might actually be evidence that you're closer to breakthrough than ever before. The enemy doesn't fight hardest against those who pose no threat. He intensifies his tactics when he senses impending favor about to transform your life. This spiritual principle explains why many believers experience their greatest battles right before their greatest breakthroughs. The warfare is a sign of the wealth that's approaching. The battle is evidence of the blessing that's been released. I've counseled countless individuals through these threshold moments when everything seems to be falling apart just before everything comes together. The key to navigating these intensified seasons is recognizing them for what they truly are, not punishment but proximity indicators, not evidence of defeat but confirmation of imminent victory. This revelation transforms how you interpret difficulty. That unexpected bill, that relationship strain, that health challenge that emerged out of nowhere, these may actually be desperate attempts by the enemy to discourage you just steps away from your miracle. Spiritual opposition doesn't determine your outcome. It often confirms you're on the right path. The transformation happens when you begin to see attacks not as setbacks, but as setups for divine intervention. Your perspective shifts from "why is this happening to me" to "what is trying to prevent from happening through me." Let's explore what happens in the spiritual atmosphere when you combine prophetic gratitude with unshakable faith during these seasons of intensified warfare. Type "battle before breakthrough" in the comments if you're recognizing that your current struggles might actually be signaling your imminent blessing. When we examine the spiritual mechanics of favor more closely, we discover a critical distinction that separates those who merely pray for blessing from those who actually experience it. God responds to what I call now faith, not someday faith. This revelation transformed my entire approach to divine provision. Someday faith says, God will bless me eventually, when the time is right, when I'm more worthy, when I've proven myself. But now faith declares, the blessing is already mine, the provision is already released, the abundance is already flowing toward me. The difference between these two postures isn't subtle, it's seismic. Heaven recognizes and rewards present tense faith because it aligns with how God Himself operates. Throughout Scripture, God doesn't say, "I will be" or "I might become." He declares, "I am." Your faith is most powerful when it mirrors this same present tense reality, when it steps outside the limitations of time and claims what isn't yet visible as if it already exists. This understanding reveals why your words carry such weight in the spiritual economy. They're not just expressions, they're investments. Every declaration you make about your finances functions as spiritual currency that's either appreciating or depreciating in value. When you speak life into your situation, walking and talking as if the flood has already begun, you activate forces beyond human comprehension. I've witnessed remarkable transformations when people simply shifted their language from future possibility to present reality. They stopped saying, "One day I'll be debt-free," and started declaring, "My freedom is already in motion." They abandoned phrases like, "I hope to have enough," and embraced, "My cup overflows with abundance." This isn't magical thinking, it's aligning your words with heaven's perspective. Now I want to address a critical misconception about divine favor that keeps many believers trapped in cycles of lack. Many view God's blessing as a one-time event, a single moment of breakthrough that solves everything. But the biblical pattern reveals something far more powerful. Favor is designed to be a continuous flow, not an isolated incident. When you align your life with God's purposes, you don't just experience a random downpour of blessing. You step into a sustainable system of supernatural supply. The flood doesn't come once and then dry up. It establishes new waterways that continue flowing as long as certain spiritual conditions are maintained. This revelation explains why some believers experience temporary breakthrough but can't sustain it. The initial flood came, but the channels weren't properly maintained. Divine favor continues flowing most consistently through lives characterized by three qualities: faithfulness, humility, and generosity. When these attributes remain intact, the supply never diminishes. I've observed this principle in countless lives. Those who remain faithful stewards of small blessings eventually become stewards of greater abundance. Those who maintain humility despite elevation continue to rise. Those who remain generous regardless of their needs experience supernatural multiplication. This alignment isn't about perfection, it's about direction. God doesn't expect flawless performance, but He does look for consistent orientation toward His purposes. The transformation happens when you shift from seeing blessing as an event to recognizing it as a covenant relationship that requires ongoing engagement. Type continuous flow, not occasional flood, in the comments if you're ready to shift from pursuing momentary breakthrough to establishing sustainable divine provision in your life. As we've journeyed together through these profound revelations about divine favor and financial overflow, I hope you've caught a glimpse of what's truly possible when you align with heaven's economy. My prayer is that something has shifted in your spirit, that you're seeing your current situation not as a permanent reality, but as a temporary positioning before God's flood of blessing is released. You know, I create these messages because I truly believe that understanding these spiritual principles can completely transform not just your finances, but your entire approach to God's provision. If you found value in what we've explored today, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button so we can continue this journey together. There's so much more to unpack about how divine favor operates in every area of life. I'm curious, has this message resonated with something you've been experiencing? If so, type, "This flood was meant for me," in the comments below. I read through your comments and am always moved by how these biblical principles are playing out in your lives. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who's serious about experiencing the fullness of God's provision. That deserves recognition. Tap that like button as a declaration that you're positioning yourself for overflow, not just occasional blessing. Divine favor isn't just about finances, it touches every dimension of your life. I've created a video right here that explores how these same principles apply to breaking generational limitations and stepping into your full destiny. Click and continue with me there as we unpack how to position yourself for breakthrough in every area that matters to you. Remember, you're not just waiting for favor. Favor is waiting for you to align. The flood is forming, and I believe with all my heart that your season of supernatural provision is closer than you think.